Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter. I am your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on Sports Illustrated and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast. And I want to apologize in advance. I am fighting cold, and so my throat doesn't always sound the best. I have literally been doing interviews. Yesterday, Matt, I don't even know how many. We had them lined up every 20 minutes and I just stacked them. I don't know how much is cold and how much is I have been literally doing interviews all over the country. So bear with me. I apologize. But it's game day when it's Matt Hladek. Now, I want to give a shout out to a guy named Curtis. Curtis lives in Norfolk, Virginia. And Curtis sent us a great email about Matt and how much him and his buddies they get together to watch the Washington Commanders every week. And before the game, they turn off the TV from the pregame shows and watch Matt on the podcast. Now, the reason that they do that is they live in Norfolk but was raised in California. So they watch usually the Commanders and then the Raiders game. Boom, boom. But Matt, you are part of their Sunday routine. I read you all of the email. I thought it was funny. So did you. And just give a shout out real quick to Curtis in Norfolk.
Well, I appreciate you, Curtis. I appreciate you and your buddies making me a part of your Sunday routine. That really means a lot. You could be watching Fox or CBS pregame, and you choose to tune into us. So I keep that up, and I'm really grateful and appreciative.
I thought it was funny because he said he's got his friends there are all Commander fans, and now their second favorite team is Raiders because his favorite team is Raiders and Commanders are his second. So here we go. We got a lot to talk about. The Raiders should have beaten the world champions. They have proven, even with all the injuries, they absolutely have the talent. You saw them go into Baltimore. You saw them lose to the world champions, and really they beat themselves. It amazes me. This is not a team in need of a rebuild. They have a lot of injuries, and yet they're still competitive with the best teams. They certainly need a quarterback. Nobody's pretending that's not the case. Doesn't mean that Gardner couldn't improve his play or Aiden, but at this point, that's the reality. I would love your thoughts on the 2-6 Las Vegas Raiders.
Well, obviously, you are what your record says you are, and that's the most important thing here, 2-6. So, you're in the middle, like we've talked about it before. You're in a tough stretch of games here with teams that are either fighting to make the playoffs or get back in the playoff race. So, listen, it's just all about sticking together and kind of battling it out at this point. Like I think you're 2-6, your playoff hopes are pretty much down the drain, but you got half a season left and you can't just forfeit the games or, simulate as if you're playing Madden or NCAA football. So you got to go out there and play. I think that the fact that the effort was there against Kansas City and they got up for that game and they were, winning for a time and it ended up being a one-score game even with a loss shows you that they can play with these teams, even though they're, like you said, they're not at full strength. But, all that's just kind of moral victories, and those only go so far in the NFL. So I think you got to hope that you can string together a couple of actual wins at some point just to feel good about yourself. Because I know the Raiders are going to be looking for a quarterback in the offseason. I know there's probably a lot of fans saying, hey, just lose and get your high pick and get your guy. But here's the thing with that is I don't know if there is a franchise guy like there was last year. You knew last year there was Caleb Williams, May, Daniels. Those three guys were going to be, top three picks. They were all there. You don't want to force something that isn't there with a quarterback, unless they really feel good about it, But it's a fine line, it's a fine situation because you also can't lose out. You also can't keep losing games because that, I don't necessarily believe that wins late this season that don't mean anything carry over to the next year. They don't. Every season is different. But you can't, in a first-year head coach, you don't want to end with such a long losing streak or think like the ship is completely off course.
I could not agree with you more than I do on that. There's a lot of issues to me. First of all, you overturn a lot of your roster every year. It's not the same team, and I think that's 100% correct. You hit on a point that I have been trying to make, and I don't know that Raider Nation's picking up on it. Now, because you and I are personal friends, the immense respect I have for Raider Nation. So when I say I don't think they're getting it, it's not because I think they're ignorant, lacking knowledge. It's because I think they're so tuned in on we don't have a quarterback. If there isn't a guy there, it doesn't matter how high your pick is. Now, what helped the Raiders last year, there wasn't a guy there, so they go get a generational talent in Brock Bowers. That could very easily, but again, talk on that some more about it doesn't, I mean, unless you're number one, or even if you are number one, if there isn't that guy there, then you're in a quagmire. Do you pick a quarterback to say you picked one and let a generational talent go? That's where teams poorly draft. Would you talk about that more, please?
Yeah, it's a conundrum for sure. And listen, we don't know when we sit here right now, um, almost 5 months before the draft. Basically, we don't know what these. Actually, almost 6 months. What am I saying? We don't know if these, the Raiders scouting department, what they're going to think about these college quarterbacks. We don't know if they're really going to be convinced on a Shador Sanders or a Carson Beck or a Cam Ward or whoever. And make that pick with conviction. But you don't want to force a quarterback pick because that is a death sentence. It sets your franchise back. It's believe me, I've seen it up close and personal with these the two New York teams over the years, where the Jets have been searching for a quarterback forever. And the Giants, when they replaced Eli Manning, they felt forced to pick one in a weak quarterback draft. And now you've had a half a decade of Daniel Jones where you're kind of just spinning your wheels. You want to make sure you have a guy that you feel great about. And I don't think you can think about the draft picks just yet. And again, it's not like we said last year, everybody knew at this point last year that the number one pick, the prize was going to be Caleb Williams. And you knew that he was going one overall. And then you also figured, okay, Drake May, for a long time, had been thought of as the number two guy. And Jaden Daniels was coming up because of the huge season he ended up having at LSU. And obviously he worked his way to number two. And that was your top three picks. I don't see that happening this year unless teams talk themselves into these QBs, which may not be the smartest idea.
So I was talking to an NFL general manager this week and just asking him, can you give me some ideas on what you think of some certain guys? And he literally said to me, he goes, last year at this point, we didn't know that Jaden Daniels was for sure a one. We didn't know that JJ McCarthy was. He goes, Hondo, I could give you some ideas of guys we're watching. And he did. He goes, but I can't even remotely give you how they're stacked and ranked. He goes, their biggest games are coming up in the second half of the year. Then there's the playoffs and the bowl games. He said, I will tell you this, and I'm paraphrasing here because it's me and you, but he said, I'll tell you this. I don't see a can't miss franchise guy, and he put yet. So I think sometimes people need to understand it doesn't matter if you have the number one. And let's go back to Anthony Richardson. When he came out, I told everybody on my shows, all of them. This is a paraphrase, but I had one general manager who is considered a great quarterback drafter say to me, I wouldn't touch Anthony Richardson. He's massive. He looks fantastic. He looks like he's made out of granite. He hasn't played enough. I'm not sure about his commitment. just because I haven't seen enough. Questions about leadership because I don't know his leadership. He hasn't played enough. And he goes, I would not even remotely touch him before the third round. Okay. But then he put in my thing, and I reported this, and I'm paraphrasing. Somebody will, because he can throw the ball a million miles and he's big. And I always ask him, who do you compare him to? He told me Jamarcus Russell. Now, fast forward. Last year, he looks good early, goes down injured. Last week, unexplicitly,
Taps out.
he wants to tap out and get benched. Okay, how you doing over there, Colts? You wasted all this money on a guy that your team, he quit on his team. He quit on his team. There's no other way to get around it. I talked with a player who played for the Colts for many years, very familiar with that organization and franchise, very connected, beloved by the fans. He's a great friend of mine in Shannon. I asked him, what do you think? He told me he's done. That locker room will never trust him again. And then Raider fans emailing me, oh, we could get him cheap. You want a guy that just quit on his last team? I mean, tell
It's
me, Matt, make sense of this situation with Anthony Richardson.
I can understand the Raiders fans saying, "Oh, we can get him cheap, get a guy, with potential." But I think for me, I think that would only be intriguing if you got him this week and he started the rest of the year because you say, "Listen, our season's really not going anywhere. We got to let's start this guy the last 8 weeks, 9 weeks, whatever, and he's gonna be, we'll see what we have." Because next off season, if you're the Raiders, do you really, or another team, do you really trust yourself turning over the job to Anthony Richardson when, I mean, you still don't know, he still hasn't played enough because he got hurt last year. He got hurt at the beginning of this year, which is why Joe Flacco came in for a start or two in the first place. And then with tapping out, now Flacco's the starter this week. And I think there were a bunch of people criticizing the Colts because they were saying, well, you drafted a kid fourth overall. You knew he was raw. You knew he needed to develop. You got to give him time. But here's the thing, and this is where teams have such a fine line. And again, it's an issue with overdrafting QBs or playing them too soon. You got to worry about the other 52. And if guys in that locker room are competing and fighting for a playoff spot, which right now the Colts are in the playoff mix. There's a lot of season left, but they're in the mix, not only in the wild card, but in the division a little bit as well. You owe it to them. And Shane Steichen, the head coach, owes it to himself to play the best option to win games. Mm-hmm. And I know someone said, well, what's their best outcome? They go, 9-8 or something like that, and they make the playoffs. Okay, that's not, ultimately that's not what you want to do every year. You want to aim higher than that. But for now, you can't just dismiss that especially when you have a guy who, like you said, it's not even just that he struggled a little bit or hasn't played great. Asking out of that game and then not being smart enough to say publicly, listen, as members of the media, we know athletes and coaches lie or don't tell aren't always forthcoming. I don't want to recommend them doing that. But please, if you're an athlete and you're ever in a situation like Anthony Richardson again, for your own good, lie to the media and say, I got a cramp. I felt a pain in my hip, whatever he had been dealing with. I had to get it checked out. Anything but saying I was tired, because that's going to stay with him. And I think it's going to stay with him, not just in Indianapolis, but it's going to stay with him, I think, for the rest of his career, unless and until he puts something on tape that overtakes that, where he really starts playing like the potential that the Colts saw when they picked him that high?
This is exactly what I preach about
Mhm,
every draft about bad drafting teams.
mhm,
You take a Richardson, when the good drafting team says, listen, I didn't have anything higher than a third round grade on the guy. And they are able to snatch good players because bad teams are desperate. Years ago, my dad taught me something I've never forgotten. Never make a move out of desperation unless it's life or death.
mhm,
I'll give you a great example. I was buying a home one time, and the guy goes, well, you better buy quick. This is a hot property. And the moment he started to push me, I'm like, okay, we're going to take a couple days and think about it. Well, it won't be here. I said, okay. And 3 days later, he calls me back. Hey, I'm just wondering if you're still interested in the property. I said, oh, the one that was hot that you said I had to make an offer that day. Yeah, well, some stuff fell through, and I made a $50,000 less offer than I was going to make that day because he tried to push me, and I got the house. Um, I just, I'll give you another example. I was going to buy a horse one time for $1,700, and the person's like, "Oh, it's not going to be available." I said, "Okay." So I didn't buy it, and because I was going to go on like a Saturday, and the next day I found a better one, and the lady was super sweet. She goes, "I just want it to go to a good family." She goes, "And you guys are a good family. What would you pay me for it?" I said, "I don't know. You tell me." And she gave me a figure that was like $1,000 cheaper because she just wanted to go to a good home. And the person calls me a week later. You still interested in this horse? I said, oh, you mean the one that wasn't going to be there?
yeah,
No, thanks. Already bought another one. I don't like desperate moves. And so bad drafting teams, we don't know if Anthony Richardson may be a great quarterback, but there were enough reasons to know a bad team's going to take him in the first round. And that's the predicament the Raiders are in, that you just simply don't know yet. You don't want to make a bad decision. All right. I want to turn to a different subject. It's it's one very dear to my heart. And in the interest of full disclosure, before this happened, last week I talked to Jack Jones, Colton Miller, and Matthew Butler, and Adam Butler about this in the locker room. And I thought it was funny because I talked to all of them about it before this happened. Trayvon Diggs has an issue with a reporter who makes some comments, and he felt like the guy was lacking knowledge, ignorant about the play. And he goes after the reporter. Now, I got a couple things I want to say that I think are going to surprise people. I don't have a problem with one thing Trayvon Diggs did. I don't think Trayvon Diggs is ignorant at all. He knew the play. He understood the play. And number one, I we all know that even though people say they don't watch, they do. We know that for a fact. I know that's one advantage I think I have is people don't try to pretend like they don't with me. They're very open that they do. Number two, I'm in that locker room. I face them. I look at them. I talk to them. They'll text me, call me, whatever. But I always try to go to people and try to learn what happened here. I know it irritates some fans of me sometimes because I'll say, I haven't seen enough. I want to go back and watch the film, or I want to talk to the player and get some more. I don't have a play. Media has a voice and they shape the narrative often. That's a fact. We can't get around that. So when they do it to be the blowhard, to have the hot take, and they're wrong, I don't have any problem with a player holding them accountable because the media holds the player accountable. I don't have a problem with this. I loved it. I wish we saw it more. I will give you a very quick story. I have a guy that I went to him one time and said he threw an interception. I said, "What happened on this interception?" And he looked at me and said, "Are we on or off the record?" I
mhm,
said, "We can be whatever you want." He said, he goes, "Off deal." He said, I rolled and I'm looking one direction because I'm supposed to look off the safety and then throw to a spot. He goes, rookie receiver. He wasn't in the spot. And he said to me, please blame me. I don't want to throw the rookie under the bus. I said, deal. No problem. Then a couple of weeks later, this quarterback has a situation. It's almost the exact same play, throws the ball, and a veteran receiver wasn't in the right place. This pass gets picked off. Okay. So I went to the quarterback and said, that was on the receiver, right? And he goes, it was. He goes, we're off the record. I said, sure. But I mean, I was able to see. And he goes, yes. So I reported receiver was in the wrong spot. That's not on the quarterback. The receiver came to me and said, did so and so tell you that? I said, no, he did not. He goes, but it was the same play that earlier in the year, the rookie. He goes, yeah, you're absolutely right. He goes, I appreciate that you watch the film and you know what you're talking about. So I have no issue with Diggs whatsoever. It's like there was a play. Now, listen, I'm not pretending Colton Miller's having his best year, but there was a play recently where a tight shot showed Colton Miller getting beat. But what they didn't show was there were three guys in his area, so he could only block one, maybe two. Somebody was going to get free. Oh, Colton Miller's terrible. Like, no, he's not. I mean, there was nobody there to chip. There was no help. You couldn't adjust the line. It wasn't a bad play by Colton Miller. Colton Miller actually played the play as best as he could. It was better coaching on the opposite side of the ball. My point is, I have no issue with this. Your thoughts?
The only issue I could take with it, and I think it's not a great look, is because, with the Cowboys and all the talk about everything they do gets magnified, is him doing it outside the locker room and calling the guy out on camera like that. I have no issue with him directly confronting or talking with uh, the reporter, or Brooke. I think it was Mike Leslie was the guy's name, and saying, because I saw the tweet, I watched the highlight, and to me it seemed like the implication was he wasn't in giving his best effort to knock George Kittle out of bounds on the play. It was sort of, or he wasn't in the right spot, like he wasn't paying attention. It was like questioning what he was doing completely. So I have no problem with the player saying, because listen, I have to say this. There are times when, in the heat of watching a game as a fan or even as a reporter, you see people tweet things or say things, whatever, because they think that the play is on a certain guy and it might not have been. Because we don't, it's especially true, I think, with defensive backs and coverages, because coverages are so, can be so intricate, and there's so many different rules and things like that that we're not aware of, that you may think just because a guy's in the area of a completion that it's his fault, when it's not. He's doing the right thing, and the defense either had a good play call on, or somebody else wasn't in the right spot, or whatever. So I have no problem, especially when I think part of the implication of the tweet was that he didn't give his best effort. I had no problem with a player saying, "Listen, you like don't say that. If you don't come to me, if you don't realize what is going on,
Mm-hmm.
then don't make a comment, because saying a guy's
Yep.
not playing with his best effort is damning. That's
It's a
just
mortal sin
that
in a
is
locker room. And so to me, again, I have no problem with what Diggs did.
Mhm.
I get people who get angry at me because I'm not as harsh. Like I'll say this, like for example, let's use Jack Jones. Okay. I love Jack Jones, the human being. He is one of my favorite people. He is the most sincere, kind, uh, warm humans you'll ever meet. And I I'll every time if I'm going to be critical, I point that out about people because so many times in our culture, if you're critical of someone, they just assume it's just like the election. I mean, if you vote for this person, you hate America. If you vote for the other person, you hate America. It's just so stupid. And we've almost become so tribalized in America. If I disagree with you, I hate you. I don't ever want to be associated with that. And so, you can say, hey, Jack Jones probably should have done this or that, but great guy. I'm not. I've never questioned Jack's heart. Hard worker, Holton Miller. I mean, all these guys, great players, and I just think when you're a media member in a let's get clicks society. Listen, we all need clicks. It's how we pay our bills. But and this is what I love about being part of Sports Illustrated is our philosophy is we're going to earn clicks by being thorough and being consistent over years. We're not just looking for today's quick hitch. And some of these people are so quick. I heard a media member recently calling something out, and I thought, you're an idiot. You literally don't understand the game of football. I have no problem with it. Lastly, and we got to hurry here. Patrick Graham continues to be an elite coach. He's down 3 really stars: Christian Wilkins, Marcus Epps, and Malcolm Koonce. Crosby's missed a game, been injured for a couple. They've had other injuries. And other than one game, Carolina, this team continues this defense to play well. Patrick Graham, this guy's got to. I mean, I don't want him to leave the Raiders personally because I like cover him and I respect him as a human being. But this guy continues to show his value, does he not?
Again, yeah, and we've said this a bunch of times. This is something that's been a hallmark of his defense is going back to his time in New York when they played with struggling offenses, is that they've always brought it. They've always been the tone setters. They've always kept the team in the game, and in some cases, almost single-handedly won games with their efforts. I think that, excuse me, you're rubbing off on me over here. Again, I think this is a guy that doesn't necessarily get the attention nationally from the media because his teams that he's coached for haven't won. Mm-hmm. But I think that within the NFL, whether it's the people who really study film in the media to the decision makers on these teams and around the league, they understand how good he is. They understand, what type of coach he is. So I think the important people know just how good Patrick Graham is. And I think you'll still hear, no matter how this Raiders season finishes up, I think you'll hear his name either as a head coaching candidate in the offseason, or if for some reason the Raiders cleaned house and got a whole new staff, he would be quickly snatched up as a defensive coordinator elsewhere.
I'm going to tell you, if that happens and the Raiders clean up and that next coach doesn't keep Patrick Graham, I got real issues with that next coach. And I'll say it right now, I would be stunned. And I'm not calling for any firings. Any coach that would let him go, I would have to question, okay, how much of it's just ego to prove I'm going to do it my way? Because your defense responds and loves that guy. And I think there'd be a lot of Raiders who could be key building blocks for the future. They'd be like, all right, I'm out. All right. Tell everybody where to find you on X.
Sure. You can find me at Matt Hladik 919 at MATTHLADIK 919. And I'm always down to talk some ball with everyone.
Thanks, brother.